It was bedtime. Wendy had finished her story, the light had been turned out, and they were all snuggled down in their beds. But what Wendy didn't know was that outside the window 2 extra pairs of ears were listening in. Peter Pan loved Wendy's stories, but he couldn't go home yet. His shadow had escaped again and was hiding in the bedroom. Peter and Tinkerbell crept in and searched, opening drawers and looking under beds. Suddenly, Peter dived into a corner and came out holding a very wriggly shadow. "Who are you? And what are you doing?" came a voice from the darkness. Wendy, Michael and John had woken up. Peter was now sitting on the floor, trying to tie his shadow round his foot. Wendy went to help. "You've done it!" cried Peter, as he proudly looked at his shadow, now firmly stitched back on. Tinkerbell pulled at Peter's sleeve. "Come on, Peter! We can get back to Neverland now!" "What's Neverland?" asked John. "Neverland is our home," replied Peter, his eyes sparkling. "It's a magical place full of adventures with mermaids and pirates. You must come with us." Tinkerbell did not look happy. "How do we get to Neverland?" wondered Michael. "We fly, of course," said Peter, now flying upside down round the room. "But we can't fly," said Wendy. Peter grabbed a grumpy Tinkerbell, turned her upside down and shook. Magic fairy dust floated down onto the 3 children, tickling their necks. "Just think of something happy and you'll fly," cried Peter, back up by the ceiling. The children searched for a happy memory and concentrated very hard. Slowly and magically, they felt their feet lift up from the floor. They could fly! "Come on," called Peter, who was already outside the window. "Follow Tink, she knows the way." Tinkerbell was leaving a glittering trail behind her. The children launched themselves out of the window, eager not to be left behind. They had done it and were off to Neverland. The sun had started to rise over the sea, making everything sparkle. Tinkerbell leading the way, with Peter, Wendy, Michael and John, their arms outstretched, flying behind. As they flew over the island, Peter excitedly pointed out his favourite places. Mermaid Lagoon passed underneath, and they waved to the mermaids who lay on rocks in the sun. A village high on the cliff came next. "Tiger Lily lives there," Peter called out. And on they flew, round the cliff and into a bay. An enormous pirate ship lay anchored below, the skull and crossbones fluttering in the breeze. Peter quickly led them out of sight. "Captain Hook and the pirates live there," he whispered. "We've had so many battles. The only thing Hook is afraid of is a crocodile. It bit his hand off and now follows him everywhere." Peter laughed at their shocked faces. "Don't worry," he said. "We can always hear the crocodile coming. He's so greedy. He swallowed a clock, so he tick-tocks everywhere he goes." Peter and his new friends flew off towards the forest. The forest was high and dark, with closely packed trees. Suddenly, Peter dived headfirst down through the branches. The others struggled to keep up, twisting and turning, their clothes catching, before finally landing in a clearing. Peter was proudly standing next to a large tree stump. He pushed and twisted a knot in the wood, and the secret entrance to his home appeared at the base. Peter jumped in, and a "Follow me!" floated out of the hole. The children bravely dived in after him, whooshing down the chute and into the darkness. As their eyes adjusted to the dim light, they were met by many more pairs of eyes looking back at them. But who did they belong to? "Lost boys," commanded Peter, "say hello." A cry of welcome came from the happy faces of the lost boys. They all lived with Peter and surged forward to greet their new friends. The next morning, all Wendy could think about were the mermaids. She'd read all about them and was desperate to see them. The lagoon was beautiful. Sunlight sparkled on the turquoise sea, but raised voices suddenly disturbed the stillness. "Pirates! What are they doing here?" whispered Peter. The pirates had captured Tiger Lily, Peter's friend from the village. She was tied up and being rowed out into the lagoon. "This is your last chance," came the shouts from a pirate. "Tell us where Peter Pan lives." Peter had an idea, and he flew as close as he dared. Hiding behind a rock, he changed his voice and pretended to be Captain Hook. He loved playing tricks on the pirates. "You fools!" came his booming voice. "Let her go at once!" The pirates whirled round, nearly falling out of their boat. They expected to see the captain standing right next to them, but there was no one. "Untie her and let her go!" came the voice, sounding just like the captain. But, Captain, you told us to leave her on the rock," stammered one pirate, talking to thin air. "Do as I say, or I'll leave you on the rock," came back Hook's voice. The scared pirates quickly untied the knots holding Tiger Lily. She dived into the water and swam away free. But when the pirates returned with no answers and announced that the captain himself had told them to let her go, they were in serious trouble. Hook was furious. It must have been Peter Pan playing tricks again. "How dare he pretend to be me? No one does that and gets away with it," spluttered the very red-faced captain. Hook started to plot his revenge. The moon shone brightly over the forest and lit the way for Tinkerbell as she flew out of the tree stump. Poor Tinkerbell was feeling very sad. Peter was her best friend, but now he was always with Wendy and her brothers. "He wouldn't even notice if I wasn't here," she sobbed, tears filling her eyes. Over on the other side of the forest, pirates were quietly searching every inch. Captain Hook had given his orders. Pan had to be found. Suddenly, a glittering trail flew past one of the pirates. It was Tinkerbell. He sprinted after her and made a grab. Poor Tinkerbell had no idea what was happening. She had been careless and wasn't looking where she was going, and now she had been caught. On board Captain Hook's ship, a meeting was called. Hook was delighted. He finally had Tinkerbell and a way of getting to Peter Pan. Tinkerbell listened hard as the pirates talked, but she couldn't make out every word. She kept hearing Peter's name, followed by lots of evil laughter. She had to escape. As the pirates left, Tink started to push against the side of the jar she was being held in. Slowly, it started to wobble. Then a little more, and more, and more, and down it came, the glass breaking on the floor. The poor, dazed fairy crawled out and flew off to warn Peter. But it was a trap, and the pirates followed silently behind. Tinkerbell flew as fast as she could. She raced to the tree stump, opened the entrance, but she didn't close it, and the pirates pounded in after her. All the children were rounded up and taken away. But where was Peter? Peter had left everyone sleeping in their beds. He'd gone off to find Tinkerbell. She'd been gone for ages, and he'd started to worry. On his return, seeing the open door, he knew something wasn't right. His home was empty apart from a very dim light coming from a sobbing Tinkerbell. "What happened, Tink?" Peter asked. "Hook! He's taken everyone and it's all my fault," wailed Tinkerbell. "Don't worry," comforted Peter. "We'll get them back." Wendy, Michael, John and the Lost Boys had spent a very uncomfortable night tied up on the deck of Captain Hook's ship. "Tell me where Peter Pan is, or you'll walk the plank," threatened the captain. No one said a word. They weren't going to give Peter away. Hook whirled round and pointed at Wendy. "You will be first." Wendy stood up bravely and walked towards the edge of the ship. She wasn't afraid. "Peter will come," she told herself. Slowly, Wendy walked along the thin plank, the end getting closer and closer and closer. "Hook!" came a shout. Everybody looked up, and there, high up on the rigging, was Peter. "Let the others go," Peter ordered. "I'm the one you want." Peter flew down, and Hook, his sword drawn and glinting dangerously, ran to meet him. Round and round the ship Hook and Peter raced, swords clashing. Hook swung at Peter, but Peter was too quick and easily stepped out of danger. Peter slashed at Hook with his own sword, forcing Hook closer to the edge of the ship. But what was that? Tick-tock, tick-tock. Hook started to tremble, and he stared wildly around him. The crocodile must be close by. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Hook was so distracted he didn't notice a thick rope, and he tripped. Desperately, Hook flapped his arms as he tried to find something to hold on to, but there was nothing, and Hook found himself falling down and down and down into the sea and the waiting crocodile below. Cheers erupted from all the watching Lost Boys. Hook was gone forever. Tinkerbell flew to Peter, and the others joined them, looking down into the empty sea. "That was quite an adventure," said Wendy. "But I think it's time for us to go home." The Lost Boys gathered round with sad faces, and Wendy took pity on them. "You can all come home with us if you like." But Peter and Tinkerbell shook their heads. They belonged here in Neverland. Wendy, Michael, John and the Lost Boys all waved goodbye and started their long journey home. But Peter called out after them, "I'll see you soon. I'll be there outside the window to listen to your stories." Wendy smiled and gave a final wave, and Peter waved back.